Good evening, welcome back to Coop's Reviews. I have a very special episode for you guys today, because instead of just looking at one game today, I'm going to be looking at 4 different games. And all 4 were made on Sega's third video game console, the Sega Saturn. But first, remember about 6 years ago when I said this on the 10th episode of Cooper's Perspective? And I'm not getting a Sega Saturn, probably ever? Well, about that 18-year-old me. Times have changed. Special thanks to my friend Omar, who surprised me with this Japan-imported Sega Saturn he got me about 2 to 3 years ago. I never thought I would have owned one of these in a million years, so it really meant a lot. I have some pretty crazy-ass friends. Also, another quick special thanks to Seawade1 on eBay for modding and fixing my console. He basically repaired it and modded it to be region-free. So now this thing is basically a super-powered Sega Saturn, and I couldn't be happier to own it. So yeah, thank you to Omar and Seawade1 for all their help with getting me this Sega Saturn. This video would not have been possible at all without both of them. With all of that out the way, let's take a look at Sonic's very short-lived career on the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn was released in Japan on November 22nd, 1994. The decision to release the Sega Saturn this early on caused a bit of controversy within the company, specifically the American Sega teams. One of the biggest reasons was that Sega of Japan decided to release the Sega Saturn around the exact same time as the Sega Genesis attachment, the 32X. And a lot of the employees felt that it made Sega look greedy as a company to release a whole new game console, along with an entirely pointless attachment so close to each other. Despite this, the Sega Saturn would not be released in America until a whole 6 months later. However, that wasn't always the plan. The CEO of Sega of America at the time, Tom Kalinske, made it clear in March 1995 that the Sega Saturn would be brought over in September of that year. Then suddenly, Sega of Japan would toss this huge mandate on them to release the Saturn much earlier, mainly so they could beat the Sony PlayStation to market. How much earlier did they want to launch it? Well, the whole world would find out at the first ever Electronic Entertainment Expo held on May 11th, 1995. During Sega's presentation, they gave details on what the Sega Saturn was like, how much it was gonna cost, all that stuff. However, Sega would surprise literally everyone when they announced that the Sega Saturn would be released on the same day as the presentation, with 30,000 consoles already being shipped to retailers like Toys R Us and a few others. The sudden launch of the Saturn in the States would also indirectly lead to the console's major downfall. For starters, a lot of major retailers were pretty pissed off about how Sega just dropped the console like that, and didn't even alert them ahead of time so they could stock up on units. This would lead to retailers like Walmart and Best Buy backing out of stocking Sega Saturns. And as a gaming company, if you lose both Best Buy and Walmart, you're pretty fucked. This led to the Sega Saturn selling miserably in the US, and it was the polar opposite in Japan. The Saturn was doing insanely well over there, mostly due to some great advertising, and a good assortment of games being released. But across the West, even with a $50 million advertising campaign, people just weren't buying the Saturn. So with the failed US launch of the Saturn, Sega realized that they desperately needed a huge selling point for the system. Now, what could Sega put on their console that would potentially lead to selling more units? A Sonic game, of course! But there was a big problem with that. While Sonic Team was working on a Sega Saturn game at this time, they were busy working on what ended up becoming Nights into Dreams, which would later launch in summer of 1996, which Sega wanted to launch a new Sonic game around that time. So, while Sonic Team was busy in Japan working on Nights, Sega decided to put the American team, Sega Technical Institute, in charge of making the next big Sonic title on Saturn. So how'd that pad out? How do you think? Well, where do I start with this mess? Okay, going back to the Sega 32X, the attachment was pretty infamous for not having a mainline Sonic game be made for it. And while it did have Knuckles Chaotix, even the Sega CD got Sonic CD, STI were actually in the middle of making a new Sonic game for the 32X, titled Sonic Mars. A proposal for the game was conducted on May 14th, 1994, and Sonic Mars was mostly gonna rip material straight from the Sonic Saturday Morning cartoon, which was actually about to get cancelled. Foreshadowing? Yuji Naka was actually present for the proposal, and the most input that he gave the team was shaking his head and telling them, good luck. Damn, what a bitch. However, shortly after the pitch got approved, the lead designer for Sonic Mars, Michael Kosaka, would leave the project after having some internal issues with Dean Lester, the producer of Comic Zone. With the lead designer of Mars out the picture, this meant Chris Sin had to take command, and he'd never been a lead designer on a major video game before, and boy was that about to backfire. With Chris Sin in charge, the original Saturday morning cartoon angle was dropped, and production of the game was moved to the brand new Sega Saturn console. At this point in the gaming industry, most video games, most notably Mario, were making the leap from 2D to 3D, which meant that this next Sonic game was to be Sonic's first ever full-fledged 3D platformer. There was a major catch though: the Saturn. Unfortunately, making a fully 3D Saturn game was almost impossible to pull off. But that's not what Sega wanted to hear. They wanted something revolutionary like Super Mario 64, but for Sonic. And STI would later find out that making a fully 3D platformer on the Saturn was just a nightmare. This would lead to an extremely lengthy development hell, spanning almost 2 fucking years. A lot of which I don't want to include in this video because it would take up a full hour of this review. To try summarizing this whole mess, this Saturn Sonic game would famously be known as Sonic X-Treme, and it was due to be released around the holidays of 1996, to compete with Super Mario 64, and even a new IP, Crash Bandicoot. Sonic X-Treme would be shown off at several gaming conventions including E3, which led to a kinda mixed reception, I guess? I mean, some people found the fisheye lens gameplay to be a bit nauseating to look at. Like, I'm sorry, but imagine trying to play the whole game like this. It's just, ugh. Not to mention, behind the scenes, STI employees were struggling to get this game together. The developers would be building huge portions of the game on decent PCs, but once they tried converting it to Saturn hardware, the tough architecture of the system made the game nearly impossible to run well. One pretty infamous moment during development was when an effort was made by STI to get the Nights into Dreams game engine, because they genuinely felt that that game engine would be a huge resource for them. And it was. They were actually reconstructing the game using the Nights engine, and it was going relatively smooth until Yuji Naka got word that STI was trying to do this, and proceeded to kinda throw a hissy fit to a point where he threatened to leave Sega if STI didn't stop using the Nights engine for Sonic X-Treme. Wow, what a crybaby. So, STI had to get rid of the 2 weeks of work that they put together, and go back to their own methods of trying to get the game to run, which led to very poor results. Two stories I find interesting is that there were at least 2 developers that became fatally ill from the amount of crunch they were putting into finishing the game. The stress on them was so bad that they were informed by doctors that if they didn't quit working on the game as often as they were, they would only have 6 months left to live. Jesus Christ. Could you imagine if Sonic X-Treme managed to get released in time, but then at the very end of the fucking game you see in the credits, in loving memory of, and it's the 2 fucking developers that died trying to get the game out in time? I'm so glad that's not the timeline we're living in. Here's another interesting factoid I can't get over. Sonic X-Treme obviously had Sonic as the main playable character, but Tails was also planned to be playable, Knuckles was gonna have these overhead maze sections, I think Amy was also planned to be playable, and there was gonna be another character, Tiara Bubowski. Is that seriously her last name? She was gonna be a brand new character who would have had these traditional 2D side-scroller levels. It's, Honestly, the whole development of Sonic X-Treme is one of the most fascinating stories in gaming history, but I don't want to be here forever talking about it, so instead, I'd recommend watching Stuff We Play's hour-long documentary about the game. It gives a really great look at just about everything that went wrong. Or, if you don't have an hour to spare and you want a more abridged look at Sonic X-Treme's development hell, then I recommend watching Matt McMuscle's What Happened on Sonic X-Treme. It's a great watch. So, once the holiday '96 deadline was about to hit, it became very clear to everyone involved that Sonic X-Treme would not be ready in time. Despite hours of crunch, multiple builds being made, plus a decent amount of attention for the game, Sega announced that Sonic X-Treme would have to get delayed to 1997. And this delay would almost immediately become indefinite as Sonic X-Treme was finally cancelled for good.
Honestly, with all the unhealthy amounts of developer crunch that was going on, not to mention a lot of needless tension going on behind the scenes, this game honestly wasn't looking that much worth it. Like, would it have been good? I mean, maybe. We'll never really know for sure. But still being honest, I'm kind of glad that X-Treme never saw the light of day. As much as Sega was banking on it, I really don't think this would have saved the Saturn. Maybe it could have pushed more units, but this really wouldn't have been that huge a success. And it definitely would have paled in comparison to Mario 64 and even Crash Bandicoot. Plus, Sonic Adventure is one of my favorite Sonic games of all time. So it makes me wonder if SA1 would have ever happened if X-Treme got released. That would have been the most bizarre timeline. I guess the topic now is, just what became of everything that was made for Sonic X-Treme? Well, an early version of the game from the Project Condor build was leaked online, but it doesn't really show too much besides a green field. There does exist a final build of the game, which got discovered in 2014, but I'm not sure if it's publicly available like the other build. Fun fact, the composer of Sonic X-Treme was originally going to be Howard Drawson, the same guy who worked on the music for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and Spinball. I'm not sure how much of Sonic X-Treme's soundtrack that he got to work on, though the E3 trailer music probably contains a sample of what the soundtrack was going to sound like. However, Chris Sen did create a lot of concept tracks for X-Treme, so that Drawson could have an idea on what to work with. Yes, all while he was supposed to be getting the game running properly, Chris Sen had to make a whole ass soundtrack too. He actually did upload all the concept music he made for X-Treme on his website, so it's cool to see that all of that got archived. But I guess for those who were hoping to play Sonic X-Treme in some way, well, there are two fan projects that I recommend checking out. There's Project AXSX, which I don't think has gotten an update in a few years. Then there's Project SXU, aka Project Sonic X-Treme Unity. The goal of both these fan projects is to recreate Sonic X-Treme from scratch, and they both look pretty fascinating. I'm still not the biggest fan of the fisheye camera lens, and the controls are a bit whack, but these are still commendable projects, so go check both of these out if you guys were interested. That's about all I have to say about Sonic X-Treme, so here's a fun fact to end this section of the video. The sprites for Sonic and Sonic X-Treme would later be repurposed for Sonic fucking Schoolhouse, of all games. Special thanks to the Encyclopedia for blowing my mind with that amazing gaming trivia. I'm so glad I got this book. So with X-Treme being canned, Sega still wanted a Sonic game of some sort to be available for the holiday season. So they put out a Saturn port of Sonic 3D Blast. I already heavily discussed this in my re-review, so go watch that if you have not. To keep it brief here, the Saturn port was noteworthy for being a 32-bit upgrade of the game, having a CD quality soundtrack, along with including those absolutely godlike special stages, designed by Takashi Iizuka and Dasayuki Mori. These special stages are nothing at all like the Genesis or PC versions, and I'd go as far to recommend 3D Blast on Saturn based on the special stages alone, and that's all I'll say about the topic for now. Of course, while Sonic X-Treme was cancelled, Sonic Team's Nights into Dreams game was released in the summer of 1996. While it wasn't huge competition for Mario or Crash, Nights was still a solid, fun game, and it's clearly garnered its own following over the years, along with being really popular back in the day. To add more to the Nights hype, a sampler disc called Christmas Nights was released. Now you're probably wondering, Cooper, what the hell does Nights have to do with Sonic, you rambling fuck? Well, the Christmas Nights sampler had a few extra content in the Christmas presents section. One of these presents you can unlock was a minigame called Sonic the Hedgehog Into Dreams. This minigame would feature, for the first time ever, a fully playable 3D Sonic. And it's pretty damn rough looking. Yeah, the point of this minigame is to run around as Sonic collecting all the ideas, which are these collectible spears that are in the sky. However, instead of flying around to collect them like you would as Knights, you have to jump straight up in the air to collect them as Sonic. While it does look graphically impressive for the Saturn, and seeing Sonic finally move around in 3D is great and all, the gameplay gets a little nauseating after a while. The camera is also a bit whack, but that doesn't really surprise me. This was the first time Sonic was in 3D and all. Not to mention, this is just a mini game, so it's not really trying to be this major demonstration of what a full 3D Sonic game on Saturn would have played like. And it's also insanely short, just consisting of this one level, then you get teleported to a quick Eggman boss fight, and it's just the puffy boss from Knights changed to be Eggman. But this does feature a neat remix of Final Fever from Sonic CD, which I don't see a lot of people talking about. It sounds great. That's about all the Sonic Into Dreams minigame has to offer. It's just a neat little extra from a cool sampler disc. I would recommend tracking down the Christmas Night sampler disc if you guys are interested, since this is the only way of playing this major piece of Sonic history. While Knights did get a port on PS2 in Japan in 2008, which was later used as the basis for the HD port in 2012, neither of these ports included any of the Christmas Presents minigames. Christmas Nights was there, but not the Christmas Presents. So, if you want to play Sonic's first ever 3D appearance, well, get a Sega Saturn and find the original Christmas Nights disc. Also, be sure to get Nights Into Dreams as well because it's a good game. Okay, so that was the infamously cancelled Sonic X-Treme, the Saturn port of 3D Blast, and the Sonic Into Dreams minigame that was on Christmas Nights. What else is there for Sonic on this console? Well, I think this is the part where I bring up how the rest of my Saturn collection has been imported from Japan, mainly because they're a lot cheaper than most American copies of games. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm gonna assume that it's probably because of how much of a flop that the Saturn was in the States, versus how successful it was in Japan. Ergo, Japanese copies of Saturn games are easier to come by. Though for some reason when I managed to get Sonic 3D Blast on Saturn, American copies are way cheaper than the Japanese copies. Maybe because Saturn 3D Blast didn't release in Japan until 1999, when demand for Saturn games weren't really high anymore because the Dreamcast had been out for about a year. But apart from 3D Blast, every other Saturn game I have is Japanese. However, I don't mind because, as I've shown off in previous videos, the Japanese cover arts for these games always slap. They also just have much better packaging overall, with Japanese games being in regular CD cases, rather than those bulky ass long cases that Sega had been using since the Sega CD. Why did they bother bringing those back for the Saturn? Okay, I suck at segues. The next game is Sonic Jam. That's Sonic Jam, alright. First off, this cover art. I absolutely adore it. It was designed by none other than Yuji Yukawa, the same man who would go on to create the adventure designs we'd see later. Sonic Jam was one of the first Sonic games where he did the art, and as much as I adore his modern redesign of Sonic, the way he drew classic Sonic in the Saturn era is honestly pretty underrated. He just looks so slick and cool, probably how Yuji Naka always intended. So it's pretty clear why Yukawa-san was hired from the start. Anyways, Sonic Jam is a compilation title containing the 4 main classics: Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Sonic and Knuckles. The way Sonic Jam has these games playing is rather interesting. Despite what you may think, Sonic Jam is not using emulation. Instead, Sonic Team took the source codes for the original games and reworked them to play on Saturn hardware, so they're all playing pretty accurately to the original games, despite some weird sound effects and a few occasions of slowdown, which is kind of hilarious considering how the Saturn is supposed to be more powerful than the Mega Drive. The games are still really solid to play. Sonic and Knuckles even has the lock-on capabilities for all 3 games, so Blue Spear, Knuckles and Sonic 2, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles are all available too. Each game includes difficulty modes for easy and normal, but you can play the original versions of the games as an option too. There's also a time attack mode, and the option to use the spin dash in Sonic 1, which is sick. All in all, Sonic Jam as a compilation is really solid. Not a bad way to play these games if you have access to a Sega Saturn. Though, obviously, this is not the only gameplay Sonic Jam has to offer. Underneath the main game mode is a Sonic World mode. Sonic World is where, I feel, the true meat of the game lies. Well, as you can see, this mode lets you run around as a 3D polygonal Sonic in a 3D overworld. This basically acts as a little hub area where you can go to certain buildings to look at extra content from the previous games. These can include commercials, official artwork, concept art. There's also a sound test. Not only are there the extras, there's also a little pad that you can hop on, which gives you some missions to do in the overworld. The missions can involve collecting a ton of rings, finding all the checkpoint posts, popping 3 balloons, and even getting lifted up by Tails. Yeah, Tails is also in the Sonic world, but he's mainly just flying around since you don't get to play as him. So yeah, that's basically the whole point of the Sonic world. You just run around doing missions and looking at extras. Control-wise, it's obviously recommended that you use the 3D Knights controller for this mode. Sonic plays just fine, but he can't spin dash. I wonder why they couldn't implement that. I mean, there's no real reason for you to need the spin dash, but seeing how this is probably the best case of a 3D Sonic on Saturn, I think it would have been pretty cool if Sonic had all his usual movesets here. I should also note that there's a really famous glitch in Sonic World where you can clip out of bounds. However, I've never been able to pull off that glitch myself, so here's footage of someone else doing it. Interesting. I also want to share a story from when I was much younger. I grew up playing Super Mario 64 a lot. It was one of my first ever video games, but for the longest time, before I understood how games were actually made, I always thought that there was a Sonic 64 somewhere, but I just never found a copy of it. So when I started browsing the internet in the mid-2000s, I ended up discovering footage of the Sonic world from Sonic Jam, and me just not knowing what the hell it came from, I for some reason saw that and thought, "Oh my god, Sonic 64! It is real!" You stupid kid. Fun fact, it was basically confirmed by Takashi Iizuka that Sonic World was built on an early prototype of Sonic Adventure, which can easily be confirmed by looking at some of the early concept versions of Sonic Adventure. Hell, in the Dreamcast version, you can still see a Saturn-era looking Sonic on the tornado at the end of Sky Chase Act 1. Isn't he adorable? And that was Sonic Jam. Honestly, a really cool piece of Sonic's history on the Saturn. It has some really solid ports of the older games, and a really fun overworld mode that can give you another reason to go back and play this game. It would have been really easy to just shove all the extra content in some boring ass menu, but Sonic Team decided to go the extra mile, and essentially made the small portion of a 3D Sonic game they probably could have made on the Sega Saturn if they weren't too busy making Knights. If you're a Sonic fan, and you want to collect all the collections, definitely pick up Sonic Jam when you can. I guess while we're still on the topic of Sonic Jam, are any of you guys familiar with the Sonic Jam Jam? Yeah, I guess as a tie-in for the game, there was actual Sonic Jam branded jam released in the mid-90s. They're pretty fascinating. I don't really like jam that much myself, but I honestly wouldn't mind owning these as neat collector's items. They're goofy as shit. Also, we all know about Sonic Jam on Sega Saturn, but what about Sonic Jam on Gamecom? I have no words for this piece of garbage. As my good friend the Jazzy Man said, this is easily the worst Sonic game ever released. I mean, does this look like it's fun to play? No. I'd rather put that shit next to Sonic Freeriders as the 2 worst Sonic games ever made. Do not recommend. Get the Saturn version. With all that out the way, let's move on. Ah yes, Sonic R, the second and last Sonic game to be developed by Traveler's Tales, until I guess LEGO Dimensions. This would also be the only actual Sonic game to be released on Saturn that wasn't a minigame or a compilation containing a 3D overworld. Production of Sonic R initially began as a Formula 1 racing game until Sega asked Traveler's Tales to restart the game as a Sonic racing title. By that point, it was February 1997, and Sega wanted to get the game released in November 1997. Yes, Sonic R's entire development lasted only 9 months. For a Sega Saturn game, especially one trying to be fully 3D, that's insane. Who the hell could manage something like this? John Burden, that's who, and the rest of his crew. With the experience of 3D Blast under his belt, John worked tooth and nail to figure out how the logistics of the Saturn hardware worked. So much so that when Sonic R was officially revealed at E3 1997, just 4 fucking months after the game began development, gaming journalists at the time were impressed by how Sonic R didn't have any pop-in issues, which a lot of the more noteworthy 3D Saturn games had. Instead, the graphics would fade in as you get closer to the environments. This effect was not easy to pull off. And of course, John Burden does have a few videos on GameHUD talking about how he made Sonic R, so go check those out, along with the rest of his Sonic content. Though Traveler's Tales were not the only ones working on the game, since key members of Sonic Team would be in charge of the map designs, to which John Burden and his crew would later convert them into full levels. And despite a very rushed development, Sonic R managed to get released in November 1997, to very mixed reviews. In light of other racing titles like Mario Kart 64 and Diddy Kong Racing, I'm guessing Sonic R just really wasn't up to snuff back then. I never actually got to play this game on Saturn until a few years ago. Like most people, I first got to play Sonic R through the Sonic Gems collection on GameCube, which released in 2005. And this version was mostly based on the PC version that originally released in 1998. I'll be looking at the original Saturn version of the game first, and then address the later 2 ports afterward. Believe it or not, even though it's a simple racing game, Sonic R apparently does have a story to it. Taken from the Encyclopedia itself, Sonic and Tails are drawn to the World Grand Prix when they learn that Dr. Eggman is involved. However, they soon find out that the whole race is a ruse to keep Sonic distracted, while the Doctor hunts for the Chaos Emeralds. Knuckles, never one to pass up a chance to compete against Sonic, joins as well. Amy, ever the enamored fangirl, chases Sonic to the starting line. There's no story mode or anything like that, but I always like it when racing games like Sonic R have these little plot summaries. Okay, so diving into the game itself, obviously it's a racing game, but instead of using vehicles, almost every character is racing on foot. You start off with 4 characters, but there are 5 unlockable ones. Well, technically 6, but I'll get to that later. First is Sonic, who's the most standard racer you can start out as. He has a double jump and can spin dash when standing still, so it's mainly usable when you're about to start a race. And one big gameplay thing, like a lot of the other characters, Sonic can't run on water, so he'll instantly sink whenever he touches it, which also decreases his speed by a bit. Here's an interesting piece of trivia. During E3, John Burden noticed that people would give up on playing Sonic R once the characters got submerged underwater. This was apparently because the characters moved a lot slower underwater in earlier builds. So in the final game, John Burden decided to increase the underwater movement speed. What a kind sport. Okay, the next character is Tails, who has the ability to fly for a short while, though his turning is pretty sluggish. Then there's Knuckles, who has the ability to glide, which you can seriously utilize to find shortcuts and whatnot. It's a lot of fun. The next character is Amy Rose, who's driving a full-blown car, which can be really slow and it turns like ass. She also can't jump, which sucks. And though her car can travel on water, it somehow moves even slower. Another fun fact, Amy was initially gonna have a buzzsaw attack, which John Burden showed off in an early build of Sonic R. Shame it got cut, ironically. Next are the unlockable characters. There's Dr. Eggman, who I think can be debated as the best character in the game. Like, he's alright, but has probably the best turning, and he can hover above water without any issue. It's pretty sick. Weirdly enough, Eggman is the only unlockable character who's not silhouetted, but the rest of the unlockable characters are seemingly more secret. To unlock the silhouette characters, you gotta collect 5 coins that are hidden in the levels, which can be pretty tricky to find, so I'd probably recommend using a guide. Afterwards, beat the race without getting in last place, and then simply beat the character in a race to unlock them. The second unlockable character is Metal Sonic. Of course. He's just about the same as Sonic, just without the spin dash, but he is able to stay above water for longer. You can even jump on the water so you don't sink. It's pretty cool. There's also a Metal Knuckles, who is the coolest fucking character ever, and he's only in Sonic R. Why? He's got the raddest design ever, along with being a much better Knuckles, and he has the most broken glide move I've ever seen. Metal Knuckles is such an epic character. I wish he was used in more games. Wait, did I skip someone? Oh yeah, Tails Doll, the creepypasta punchline, and probably the worst character in the game. If not, he's at least in the top 2. A much worse version of Tails who's slower, and has really abysmal turning. He can hover over water, but apart from that feature, Tails Doll just sucks. But honestly, I really can't tell if I would consider Tails Doll or Egg Robo to be the worst. Egg Robo is the last unlockable character, and it's almost like they saved the worst for last. He's almost the exact same as Eggman, but that also means he can't jump at all. Plus, he can't even float above water, which doesn't really make sense considering he's wearing a jetpack. I never ever play as Egg Robo. He's just awful. Alright, so while that's the end of the unlockable characters, there technically is one more character to mention, but I'll get to it later. How about the actual game? Well, aside from Amy and Eggman, all the characters are moving on their feet. You can either hold up to move forward, or just hold down B. I usually just use B. But one of the most common complaints with Sonic R is how the turning can be complete dog shit. The actual turning itself really depends on the character, but I'd heavily recommend using the left and right triggers to make sharper turns. I mean, it's still not perfect, but it's something. I don't think the game has a tutorial mode or anything like that. So if you didn't know how to make sharp turns in this game, now you know. Again, it seriously depends on which character you choose, which could also change your experience in the levels. One of the biggest points made against this game is that there's only 5 racetracks, 4 available at the start, and just 1 that you can unlock later. While I understand and do agree with the criticism about how there's only 5 racetracks, I think with the added context that this game was only being worked on for 9 months, it really does explain why we have such few racing arenas here. The racetracks are Resort Island, Radical City, Regal Ruin, Reactive Factory, and the unlockable Radiant Emerald. Haha, all the levels start with R. I see what you guys did there. To summarize, these levels are pretty decent? I guess I'll just go down the list. Resort Island is a great starting zone. I love the little shortcuts you can come across. The music also greatly complements the feel of the level too. Yeah, let's address the elephant in the room. You see, every level in Sonic R has a vocal theme, all composed by Richard Jacques, who previously composed 3D Blast on Saturn, and the songs feature vocals by TJ Davis. So why do all the levels have vocal themes? Well, apparently, when Richard met Yuji Naka to discuss which direction to go in for Sonic R's soundtrack, he eventually showed him the theme song, Supersonic Racing. Once Yuji Naka listened to it, he loved it so much that he pretty much demanded that TJ Davis be featured in all the songs in the game. So that's why the soundtrack is what it is. So Resort Island has Can You Feel the Sunshine, Radical City has Living in the City, Regal Ruin has Back in Time, no, not the Huey Lewis song from Back to the Future, Reactive Factory has Work It Out, and Radiant Emerald has Diamond in the Sky. Sonic R's soundtrack is pretty notorious for how split it can be between fans. People either absolutely love the soundtrack, or they absolutely hate it. Probably because a reviewer from 10 years ago called it bad or something. For me, I absolutely adore Sonic R's soundtrack, even though I recognize that it's not really for everyone. Also, yes, it really doesn't fit for a racing game, but I just can't help but love this soundtrack. I think it's super catchy, memorable, and just has a sweet personality to it. And TJ Davis is a beautiful singer. So if you hate this soundtrack, then I hate you. Though for any of you killjoys out there, you can turn off TJ Davis's vocals in the options menu. But why would you want to do that? Go outside and touch some grass for a change. John Burton was actually the one who requested that the instrumentals be included because he was pretty unsure if people would have liked hearing vocal themes in a Sonic game. Even though I've said 1,000 times at this point that I love this soundtrack, John Burton actually did have a solid point. Especially considering that at the time, this was like the third big Sonic game to include vocal songs in them. Hoo boy, we really had no clue what was coming next. Also, since Sonic R's music works as Redbook audio files on the game disc, that means you can listen to the soundtrack on any CD player, along with being able to rip the soundtrack yourself. It's pretty sick how the CD basically acts as its own soundtrack release, though there was a separate official soundtrack released in 1998. It included 2 neat remixes that you can't hear anywhere else, but it also excluded the instrumental tracks for some reason. And interestingly enough, the digital version of the soundtrack includes the instrumentals, but removes the 2 remixes from the 98 release. Weird. There was also this Work It Out single released in 1999. It includes 4 DJ remixes of Work It Out, so I guess this record was meant to be played in clubs and whatnot. These remixes have never been officially released elsewhere, so I got the vinyl for myself and decided to record and upload them to my second channel to preserve. I recommend giving this record a listen. It's pretty fascinating, and it even misspells Richard Jock's first name as Retchard. So take that, dick. That's what you get for throwing that stupid hissy fit on Twitter over T-Whoop's mediocre remix. Anyways, back to Sonic R the game. The second level is Radical City. It's pretty tight. It's also a mess, layout-wise. I really like the pinball section, as brief as it is. It's a pretty nice callback to Casino Night. I'd recommend using Metal Sonic to utilize a funny shortcut in this level that I don't think John Burton could have foreseen. Breaking this game can be hilarious. In fact, back in 2014, I accidentally clipped out of the level into the empty overworld. Yeah, I was outside the level. I uploaded a clip of it happening to my second YouTube channel, and I have no clue how I managed to do this. Also, yes, I'm playing as Supersonic in this footage. I was gonna try to save him for later as a secret, but I fucking blew it! Level 3 is Regal Ruin. I like how the wall carvings have a bunch of Chaos Emeralds on them. It feels very lore heavy. Actually, Ian Flynn, the main writer of the Sonic comics and the later to be released Sonic Frontiers, once shared that Sega of Japan made it a point to inform him while writing the comics that Sonic R is canon? Like, it's actually part of the main series canon. So all these emerald carvings, echidna statues and shit, in some insane way, they're all somehow connected with the mystic ruins in Sonic Adventure. Crazy ass continuity. Next is Reactive Factory. Like the previous levels, there's plenty to explore, but it's also just an overall mess for a racetrack. Just looking at the level maps in the bottom right give you a general idea about how cluttered they can be. Hell, the AI for the other racers can sometimes get confused on which way they should go. The level also feels weirdly unfinished. Not that all the levels are unpolished, but that becomes the case mostly in Reactive Factory. This probably has to do with the rushed development, but there are portions of Reactive Factory where some graphics are just floating in the air. It can look a bit rough. Alright, the last level is Radiant Emerald, which you can unlock by getting first place in the previous races, and it's pretty much the Rainbow Road clone. Though I do really like how transparent the floor looks on Saturn, which is a graphical effect that the later ports sadly get rid of. It's a fine level with decent shortcuts. The only real issue I have with this level is, this is where the game ends? Well, kind of. Ignoring that I spoiled this earlier, there are actual Chaos Emeralds that you can go after. Yeah, Resort Island has 1, then the next 3 levels have 2 each. Yeah, Radiant Emerald doesn't have any emeralds, ironically. You can find the Chaos Emeralds in hidden areas, mainly behind doors that need either 20 or 50 rings. Not only that, once you get the Chaos Emeralds, you have to finish in first place. Otherwise, you don't get the emerald as punishment. Eat shit, JonTron. There's no good or bad endings or anything like that, but you do get the best reward that this game could possibly give you. Supersonic! Yep, Supersonic is unlockable and he's super overpowered. He's the fastest, he has great turning, and he could stay above water for as long as he wants. Supersonic's inclusion in this game would mark the last time he would be playable in regular levels for 13 years. It took Sonic 4 Episode 1 of all games to finally bring him back. Jesus. And a really cool detail with Supersonic, if you race in Radiant Emerald as any other character, you'll hear Diamond in the Sky. But if you race there as Supersonic, you'll hear Supersonic Racing, which is a really cool detail. Okay, while Supersonic is great and all, this does lead to a pretty big issue. Before you unlock Supersonic, when you play as the extra characters, you race against the other unlockable characters, plus Sonic taking the 5th character slot. It's already pretty unfair because Sonic is better than the other characters, but once you get Supersonic unlocked, that means the unlockable characters are forced to race against freaking Supersonic. It's absolutely no contest. Not to mention, once you unlock Supersonic, there's no real reason to play as anyone else. Usually whenever I do go back to play Sonic R, I just do a quick playthrough as Supersonic. There are other modes to be found in Time Attack, like Balloons and Tag, but I rarely ever go back to these modes. There is a multiplayer mode. On the Saturn version, it's just 2-player split screen, since the Saturn only had 2 controller ports. However, if you're gonna do a multiplayer Sonic R session, stick to the Gems Collection version. While this version is based more on the PC port, instead of just 2 players, it actually has the ability to do 4-player. Yes, 4-player Sonic R, and it's only on the Gems Collection port. That is insane! I heavily recommend trying this out if you ever get the opportunity. It's a lot of fun. But going back to the Saturn version real quick, there's not much else to really discuss. Sonic R really doesn't have a lot of content to it, which is one of its biggest downfalls. It's a fun, short racing title with a great soundtrack, but it really isn't much in terms of content. I guess one last thing to mention before talking about the ports is how you can mess around with the R on the title screen. Like, you can rotate it and mess with the colors by using the face buttons. So if you want to call this game Sonic B, you can. It's cute. So in 1998, Sonic R got a PC port, which was a pretty solid port of the game. Obviously, it had to render the graphics differently, but one major extra that this port added was weather effects. This can change the look of every level, including a winter season that actually freezes the water, meaning you can now run on it. It's super cool. This weather option was actually planned to be on the original Saturn version, but it had to be cut likely due to time constraints, so the PC port restored it. You also probably noticed that it's in widescreen. This is mainly because Sonic R has a relatively decent modding community, so fans have provided neat upgrades for the game. There's even a mod that recreates the original Sega Saturn lighting. Playing Sonic R in widescreen at a perfect frame rate is honestly kinda cathartic for me. It looks great. And of course, this wasn't the only time Sonic R got ported. I brought it up a few times already, but the 2005 Gems Collection port of Sonic R is very likely the most famous version of the game out there. It includes all the same features as the PC version, along with having that awesome 4-player mode that I mentioned earlier. I'd probably recommend the version of Sonic R on Gems Collection the most. Though, if you want to mod the game and play it in full HD, then definitely get the PC version. I'd actually really love to see Sonic R get ported again. Like, imagine seeing an official HD version of Sonic R with online multiplayer. I'd actually really like to see the concept of Sonic R tackled again, with a much upgraded character roster, more levels, online play, but with most of every character running on foot again but with tighter controls. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Maybe a Sonic R2 could happen at some point. And even though this was just a kart racer, I did really like how the logo for Team Sonic Racing really emphasized the R in racing. It was a cute callback. When you really think about it, Sonic R actually marked the end of a pretty big era for Sonic. Like, just 1 year after this game, we got Sonic Adventure, which heavily changed both the look and direction of the series. With R being the only real original Sonic game to be released on the Sega Saturn, this could technically be seen as the last true classic Sonic game. It's pretty sad. This would be the last time Sonic would be pudgy, have the shorter spines, and black pupils. At least until Generations brought him back, for better or worse. I guess until we see each other again, sayonara for now, my dear friend. Okay, I don't know how to end this video. Go check out Sonic R, Sonic Jam is rad, Sonic and Christmas Nights is fascinating, Saturn 3D Blast is decent, and rest in peace Sonic X-Treme. I'll see you all in the next review, and thanks for watching. Hey, before the video ends, I just want to mention a few things. First off, some of you may be wondering, where the hell is Tails Doll? Well, initially, I was actually going to do this little cameo with Tails Doll, where during the Sonic R re-review, I would just be like, hey, I wonder how Tails Doll is doing. Then I'd call him up, and then we would have like a small conversation where I ask him how retirement's doing, you know, since Cooper's Perspective got cancelled. I would hang up, and then say something like, wow, what a bitch. I decided against doing it because, one, I don't like the idea of connecting both Coop's reviews and Cooper's Perspective, even though I feel like it would have been a nice callback. Continuity-wise, I didn't think it would make much sense. And the last thing I ever want to do is connect both Coop's reviews and Cooper's Perspective. Like, no thanks, sorry. The second reason I didn't want to do it was because it'd be really tricky to pull off. Like, some of you may not be aware of this, I don't actually have Tails Doll anymore. I handed him off to my good friend Michelle Taylor, and the issue is at the time of this video, she's in California and I'm in Louisiana, so even if I wanted to film this, I would probably have to make Michelle set up everything, and I don't really want to put that on her. She has been taking good care of Tails Doll though. She's even made a few outfits for him. So shout out to Tails Doll, my friend Michelle, and any Cooper's Perspective fan. Also, I figured I'd plug this real quick, but if any of you really like the soundtrack to Sonic R, I would heavily recommend checking out a song called Ruby Peak, which was created by my good friend Emmy Jones. I think she and the person she worked with absolutely nailed the Sonic R style. I even went on Twitter and asked TJ Davis if she liked the song, and she said she did. So if you love Sonic R's soundtrack, please go give Ruby Peak a listen. The last thing I want to mention is, I want to give a huge special thanks to my friends Anthony, Red, and Shaddix for helping me record that 4-player Sonic R footage. So huge thanks to all 3 of them, I love you all, and I greatly appreciate my friends. And that's all I got to say for now. Thank you all for watching my content. If this is your first time watching my channel, please subscribe. Please support me on Patreon if you want to have your name at the end of a video, like all these fine people right here. And again, I will see you all in the next review. Bye!